If you're still upset that the new Acura Integra is a luxury Honda Civic, then my opinion is you need to get over it, because the Integra has always been a luxury Honda Civic. And that's part of why the Integra has always been an excellent value and pretty darn fun to drive. Both of those things still apply to this Integra. But for me, the most important question is not really, is it supposed to be a Civic or not? It's how does this really compare against the BMW, the Audi, and the Mercedes? And is the price tag in the Integra low enough to compensate for some of the deficiencies that we do find in this model versus those German competitors? When it comes to design, I think Acura absolutely nailed it with the new Integra. Like many luxury car companies, Acura has one general school of design, and then they scale it up and down for the different products. But this works better on the Integra than that scaled family design does on a BMW 2 Series, for instance. It looks a little awkward from some angles, and I don't think that happens here in the Integra. I like the grille here, and I also like these really slim headlights, but these grille elements are pretty difficult to keep clean. We have full LED fog lights down below. Fog lights aren't something we find on all the competition for some reason. In a nod to past Integras, we have Integra embossed on the front bumper, and of course on the back bumper right next to the slim full LED taillights. Dimensionally, the Integra is right in line with the competition. It's about the same size as the Mercedes-Benz CLA, a little bit longer than the A3 or the BMW 2 Series. And the extra length is why I think this wears the Acura design language a little bit better than perhaps the 2 Series wears the BMW styling. We find this long hood proportion, but a significant front overhang. Acura pushed the A-pillar back to give it that long hood design, but it's still a front-wheel drive vehicle, just like the BMW, the Audi, and the Mercedes competition. But unlike those German options, this is a lift-back design rather than a sedan. So back here, we have a practical lift-back. That's a feature I really appreciate. I was worried that perhaps they would bring back a sedan, and sedans don't seem to be quite as popular as these hatchy, sporty lift-back things right now because of the cargo practicality. And this certainly would have had a smaller trunk if they hadn't gone in this direction. Out back, we have twin exhaust tips, those slim LED taillights, and another nod to the past is this little notch right here for opening up that liftback. To be fair to the Integra and to the competition, we need to pause for a moment and talk about pricing, because the Integra has always been notably less expensive than a European alternative. That applies to this generation as much as it did the very first Acura Integra. And that's part of why we find an interior that is not quite as premium as some of the alternatives, engine lineup that is not quite as powerful either. An Audi A3 starts at $34,900, a BMW $36,600, the Mercedes-Benz CLA $38,200. The Integra, this starts at $30,800, and fully loaded, the most expensive you can get your Integra is just barely over $36,000. That means that all of the options loaded onto an Integra brings this up to the base price of a BMW 2 Series Grand Coupe. So when you hear people talk about, well, the Integra isn't as nice on the inside, it's not as powerful, etc., remember, it is significantly less expensive, and we find more standard feature content. Like a lot of autonomous safety systems are standard on the Integra, standard adaptive cruise control, standard lane centering, etc., and a lot of those features you have to pay extra for on the European competition. So significantly lower base price, significantly more gadgets on it, but they're going to be compromises. The first of those compromises happen under the hood of the Integra, where we find a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine rather than a 2-liter turbo, which is more common in this segment. This engine is essentially shared with the Civic Si. Under here, it produces 200 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque, versus 221 horsepower in the base Mercedes, 228 in the base BMW, and pretty similar base figures in the Audi A3, 201 horsepower there. But all of the European competition produces significantly more torque over a much broader RPM range. So all of the European base competitors are going to be faster than this. The second compromise is the continuously variable automatic transmission. Not exactly the sportiest choice for an entry in this segment, but perfectly logical because it gives us one of the best fuel economy figures at 33 miles per gallon combined. Now, Acura giveth and Acura taketh away, because this is the only manual transmission option in this segment. And as a result, even though this drivetrain produces a bit less power than the base alternatives from Germany, if you get the manual, it's definitely more fun. That manual transmission is going to be the least efficient way to get the Integra at 30 miles per gallon combined. Most of the Integras you're likely to find on the dealer lots are going to have 235 width tires, but we don't find as grippy of a tire available in the Integra as we find in the Civic Si, although that is something that you can rectify yourself aftermarket. One big change versus the Civic Si, we have an adaptive suspension system available in the Integra. So if you're looking for a manual transmission, the same power and same engine you find in a Civic Si with a longer warranty, a better dealer experience, and a nicer interior, that's definitely one reason you want to upgrade from the Civic Si into the Integra. And that's part of why I don't find the Civic relationship to be a bad thing at all. You have the Civic Si if you want something less expensive, and if you want some of the creature comforts that are not available in the Civic Si, or you want an automatic transmission, we have an Integra for you. Another area of give and take is the front seating arrangement in the Integra. Over here on the driver's side, we find a multi-way power driver seat with a 4-way adjustable lumbar support, something that we don't find in all the competition. But over on the passenger side, we find a much more limited range of motion. Specifically, that seat cannot adjust the seat bottom for height or for tilt. So a lot of folks found the passenger seat particularly uncomfortable, especially on longer journeys, because it is quite low to the ground. We have a manual tilt telescopic steering column with a pretty large range of motion and 2-position memory over there on the door. The Integra may be longer than average on the outside, but on the inside, it's pretty average. And that's because most of the extra length happens with that really long hood profile up front. With this front seat adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, I have about 3.5, 4 inches of legroom left, but not a lot of headroom. My head's actually touching the ceiling. If I try and put my head back there, I can't really reach that headrest. Scooting over to the middle seat, you'll definitely notice that really pinched in profile because of the hinges for that rear liftgate, although in a actually more upright sitting position, I find this relatively comfortable. All the way over here on this side, this seat's all the way back in its tracks, and you can see things are definitely a little bit tight. One odd twist, no air vents for the rear passengers. I do think that's a real misstep, especially for a vehicle that's trying to aspire to be a luxury competitor. I would really have loved to have seen some air vents added. We do have some USB charge-only ports, though. There's no ski pass-through, but we do find rear seats that fold in a 60-40 fashion, and we have top tether anchors for child seats for all 3 seating positions. Down here we have an SRS airbag logo because the rear seat passengers get thorax side airbags, something that we don't find standard or available in all of the competition. In case you're wondering, those airbags are addition to, not instead of, curtain airbags that descend from the ceiling. Thanks to the lift-back design, cargo capacity, and cargo practicality are big wins for the Integra. We find nearly 25 cubic feet of cargo space back here, and I was able to squeak 6 24-inch roller bags into this cargo area. That is significantly better than the CLA or the 2 Series or the Audi A3. Now, you will notice that the load-in height is a little bit higher than some of the competition because we have this higher sort of rump right there with these tail lamps that are integrated into this area with that little slot, but we find a much, much larger and more accommodating cargo area. Under the somewhat flimsy-feeling load floor, we find a little bit of additional storage space. We have this foam divider with the tire inflator kit, but unlike the European competition, if I pull that out of the way, there's a place to put a spare tire. Although one doesn't come from the factory, you can bet that a Honda Civic spare tire would fit right there in that spare tire well, and that would give you something that you don't find in the Germans. On the inside, obviously, there are going to be a few things shared with the Civic. That's probably not too much of a surprise, and we find similar sharing in some of the competition. BMW with Mini, and Audi with Volkswagen, of course. Up here we have the controls for the moonroof, a sunglass holder right there, and a pretty standard-sized moonroof unit. One odd thing in here is that this does have the ELS audio system upgrade, but the speaker modules aren't exactly discrete on the ceiling. They're pretty chunky. You can see them right there by those handles. The driver and front passenger get height adjustable shoulder belts, height adjustable headrests, and we have this really attractive optional red interior. The center section of the seats is an imitation suede, and then we have the black accents and the red accents. I really love a red interior. Let me know if that's just me or if you agree as well. We have pretty aggressive bolstering on the front seat backs, a little bit less aggressive on the seat bottom cushion. These seats are heated, but they're not ventilated. Moving over to the front doors, we find some soft touch materials and some hard materials as well. The entire upper section of the door is all made from soft material, as is the red section. We then find harder plastics down there around the bottom of the door. Now, you should know that on the rear door panels, basically the entire thing is a hard plastic except for the red armrest in the middle there as well. Moving over to the dashboard, some of the design cues are definitely similar to what we see in the Honda Civic, like the grating right here in these air vents, but we don't have that long bar that runs across the dashboard. You won't find wood trim on this dashboard. Again, keep that price tag in mind. We have a soft touch injection molded upper section, stitched lower section of the dash, and then hard plastics below. We have a pretty accommodating bin style glove compartment. I was able to fit an 11-inch tablet computer inside. One interesting twist though, we find that soft touch material over there for the passenger's knee, but nothing over here for the driver's knee. This is just a hard plastic. I really wish those were swapped around, or we had something identical over here for the driver's side, because that does get a bit tiring on a longer road trip. Up here on the dashboard, we find a decently sized touchscreen infotainment system. The software is not like we find in other Acura models. This is actually a bit more similar to the Honda lineup. We have physical buttons over here, power, and then track forward backward knob. I don't find anything wrong with the software. It's intuitive, easy to use, and SmartFit integration uses the entire screen. Below that, we have 2 large air vents, dual zone automatic climate controls, USB inputs for the infotainment system, and then 1 USB-C charge only port, also a 12-volt power port. There's a Qi wireless charging mat down there, but as you can see, not quite enough room for some of those larger smartphones if they're plugged in to use CarPlay or Android Auto. Down here we have the drive mode selector, we have the individual button. You're not going to find that in all models, only the upper end trims have the individual mode. Other models are just going to have this toggle down here. There's a button to turn off the auto start-stop system, and auto brake hold and electric parking brake. The manual transmission is essentially the same one that we find in the Honda Civic. The throws are nice and short, and reverse is exactly where it belongs. Between the front seats, we find 2 large cup holders and then this sort of claw-shaped center armrest. There's a button in there that opens to reveal a fairly small storage compartment. On the driver's side, we find an LCD instrument cluster with LED gauges on either side. The theme of this display doesn't change too much. It does change just a little bit in terms of color between comfort, the normal mode, and the sport mode. But you can change the information that's available on the inside of each of the dials. Top-end trims of the Integra have a windshield projected heads-up display. This is certainly something that you're not going to find for the same price in the European competition. The 3-spoke steering wheel probably looks familiar to some of you. We have some small sport grips up top, thin side spokes. You'll find the controls for the infotainment system over here on the left side, along with this rotary controller that controls the left side of the instrument cluster. On the right side, this one controls the right side of the instrument cluster, and then the adaptive cruise control with the lane centering system. Out on the road, the Integra is a lot of fun, but it's certainly more fun if you get this excellent manual transmission. I love the way that Honda has tuned the transmission. The throws are really nice, the engagement is really notchy, very easy to find exactly what gear you're looking for, and the clutch pedal is just about perfect. I prefer the clutch pedal feel in here to the clutch pedal that we find in even some of the Volkswagen Golfs, like the GTI, etc. This, I think, just has a better feel to it. The manual is unquestionably the most fun way to get your Integra, but it's also unquestionably the slowest way to get your Integra. 0 to 60 here happened in 7.2 seconds versus 6.8 seconds in a CVT-equipped model that I was able to test, provided by a local dealer. You're going to find significantly faster 0 to 60 times in basically all the competition. The BMW, the Mercedes, and the Audi all suspiciously go 0 to 60 in the same time, 6.3 seconds, and that's for their base engine. If you want more power, all of those offer that, but no extra power happens here in the Integra. I have to admit, I wish that Acura had given us a 2-liter turbo in here. We know that it fits in the chassis because that's what the new Civic Type R is going to get, but no word about whether or not we're going to get an Integra Type R at some point in the future. My guess is probably not. This is another point in time where we have to remind ourselves the Integra is less expensive than the German competition, so performance numbers are obviously going to be lower. Braking numbers, however, are pretty decent. 115 feet from 60 miles an hour back to 0. That's not quite as short as the Civic Si because we don't find as aggressive of a tire on this vehicle, but if you want to put stickier summer tires, you could definitely improve the braking and the handling score. When it comes to handling, I'm going to give this an A. This doesn't have the grip of a Audi S3 or certainly an RS3 or the performance versions of the BMW or Mercedes, but again, it's not competing with those. And in the category where it is competing, this handles excellently. Because we don't have as much torque out of this 1.5-liter turbo as we find in the 2-liter competition, you definitely have to ring it a little bit higher up in the RPM band to get the most out of it, but that makes it more enjoyable, more engaging, and the handling is nice and sharp, very communicative. It's easy to tell exactly what the front end is doing, and torque steer is very well controlled. There's just a vague hint of it, but things are really, really well done here. That's why this gets an A. But if you want that next level of grip, you can get it, but you're gonna have to pay for it in the competition. Out on a rougher road like the gravel road that I'm on here, the Integra certainly has a firm suspension tune. I honestly don't notice much of a difference between the 3 different drive modes. There is a slight one. Comfort is a little bit more comfortable, but the difference is not night and day. If you're looking for a more comfortable and more compliant suspension, you're going to need to go for something larger, or something like a base version of the Cadillac CT4, which is sort of in the same price range, but not the same size range as the other vehicles that we've been talking about. Or you could get the base version of the Integra. That is going to have a slightly different suspension tune. It's also going to have slightly smaller tires, but the ride quality in that model seems to be a little bit better. But obviously, you're going to be lacking all the gadgets and gizmos that we find in this model, and you're going to have to give up the adaptive suspension system. The adaptive suspension system is definitely a differentiator between the Integra and the Civic Si. In this generation of the Si, Honda was really trying to keep the price tag under control, so they ended up removing the adaptive suspension system. So if you want Si power, Si manual transmission, and the adaptive dampers, this is how you have to go. When it comes to the ride quality score itself, I'm going to have to give this a B-, because sometimes it does lose a bit of composure compared to especially the new Audi A3. I think Audi has done an absolutely excellent job with the suspension tune in that vehicle. And the BMW 2 Series sometimes is a little bit more comfortable, which is something I hadn't expected out of BMW. It is tuned a little bit softer in the base form. Rather unfortunately, we now have to talk about cabin noise. Unfortunate because the Integra is one of the loudest vehicles I have tested in recent memory. At 50 miles an hour, I measured 74 decibels in here. And out on the open highway, especially on rougher pavement at say 70 or 75 miles an hour, the cabin is very, very loud. It's a shame because the audio system sounds pretty decent, but it's hard to hear it with the cabin noise in here. And these are not overly wide tires. They're 235 with tires. You do find wider tires on some of the competition. I think Acura really needs to spend more time with the sound deadening in this vehicle. This is the kind of cabin noise that you simply cannot fix with active noise cancellation, etc. Most of it's coming through the floorboards. There's just not as much isolation, not as much sound deadening in here as you'll find in the competition. That's why I'm going to have to give cabin noise a D. On the other hand, fuel economy is absolutely excellent. This has been punching above its weight over the week that I've been driving it. I've been averaging 34 miles per gallon, even though 6th gear is not terribly high. 6th gear is pretty low, so when you're out on the highway, the engine's revving pretty high. But likely thanks to the small displacement of this engine and of course just Honda's fuel-saving technology, this has been averaging 34 mpg. It's about 4 miles per gallon higher than the EPA estimate. This is definitely one of the most efficient entries in this segment, and it's probably going to be one of the most reliable and one of the least expensive to repair when something does go wrong, because again, this 1.5 liter turbo engine is largely shared with the Honda Civic. So if you're looking for something that's fun and engaging, easy to live with, but you're willing to give up a little bit of cabin isolation, you should definitely put the Integra on your shopping list. I have to admit that like many Acura fans, I had sort of a rose-colored view of the first few generations of Integra, but I was recently able to drive some very well-preserved versions of the original Integras, and I have to say, this model sticks pretty true to the formula. Those were not overly isolated on the inside, but they were a lot of fun to drive, they were engaging, and they were very well priced. That's basically the same formula that we see in this model. The trouble is, a lot of folks wanted the Integra to be something else, and instead, Acura decided to just be true to the original Integras, like it or not. Now it's time to tally up the pros and the cons for the Integra. Obviously, on the benefit side for this model versus the competition, we have the low MSRP. It is significantly less expensive than most of the competition. We have that manual transmission. Again, this is the only option that offers it. And we have lower expected maintenance, repair, and insurance costs on the Integra. Any way you slice it, over 3 years to 5 years, the Integra is going to cost you less than any of the German options. Whether we're talking about oil and fluid changes, dealership visits, or say curbing your wheel and wanting a new wheel, all of that is going to be less expensive on the Acura. Now, on the downside, it is a luxury Civic. I don't find that to be a problem at all, but I know some folks that are really, really offended by that for whatever reason. And if you are, then there's another alternative for you, but be prepared to pay more. Now, more of a real problem, I think, for a lot of shoppers are going to be things like the lack of options. If you want to have a brown interior, or you want a different colored exterior than is available in the limited color palette we find with the Acura, you're going to find that in the other options. For instance, if you take a look at the A3, they have a huge color palette available. That is a pretty expensive option, but if you would like to have the only factory pink color in this segment, that's going to be found over there on the A3. Also, no all-wheel drive. This is, I think, a bigger bummer because all of the competition at this point offers all-wheel drive. And we see less customization, generally speaking, in the Integra, just as we see in the rest of the Acura lineup. That's part of how it gets to that value proposition, but again, you have that balance because you just don't have some of these features available. It's also the least premium interior in this segment, to be perfectly frank. I think it's acceptable and definitely fine for the price tag, but keep that in mind because, again, the competition is going to be about $5,000 to $10,000 more. You'll find nicer bits on the inside of those, but this is less premium. The combination of the CVT and the low horsepower figure makes this the slowest entry in this segment, depending on exactly how you want to define this segment. Suppose you could say that the Lexus UX is a little bit slower, but is it in the same segment? That I'm not sure. But let's dive into the pricing, because even compared to the UX, the Integra is really inexpensive. With the base price for 2023 of $30,800, this is thousands and thousands of dollars less than the base prices of the competition, and it's better equipped than even the base Mercedes CLA 250, which for 2022, not even 2023, starts at $38,200. Some folks might say, shouldn't this be compared to the A-Class? Well, for 2023, the A-Class is disappearing in the US, so we'll just have the CLA. And if you get carried away with options, that CLA will get up to $58,000, and carried away with options on the Integra only gets you up to $35,800. That is so low that only the 2023 A3 is less expensive starting than a fully loaded Acura Integra. And for that price, you can choose CVT or manual transmission. So if you have any complaints about the Acura interior or about the CVT or whatever it is that you might not like on the Integra, keep in mind a fully loaded model is going to be about the same price or less expensive than an absolutely base BMW, Audi, or Mercedes. Also, the Lexus thrown in there as well. And you'll find more feature content on the Acura, a more engaging driving experience if you select the manual transmission. Obviously, I can't conclude this episode without talking about the Civic Si. It starts at $28,100, about $7,700 less than the Acura Integra with the manual transmission. Now, that gap is going to close up if you were to take a look at the base Integra with the CVT, but that's probably not the best corollary. Now, even at $7,700 more expensive than a Civic Si, I think the Integra is still a really good deal. In fact, I think it's just about as good of a deal as the Civic Si. Perhaps even better, depending on what you're looking for. And that, depending on what you're looking for, is really important. The Civic Si is going to be a little bit quicker 0 to 60. It's going to handle a little bit better because it's a little bit lighter. Now, for 2023, you can no longer get the summer tires on the Civic Si from the factory. So that little difference does go away. And as far as handling goes, that means that they're going to be very, very equal. But you'll notice a different nature in the Acura Integra, especially the top-end one that we're talking about here. It has the adaptive dampers that we no longer find on the Civic Si. It's also more luxury-oriented with more gadgets like the heads-up display, the ELS audio system, the Wi-Fi hotspot. The hatchback design of the vehicle gives it more cargo room, more cargo capacity in the back. Obviously, you're going to give up a little bit of structural rigidity, but I think that's a worthwhile trade-off. You also get the power driver's seat and power passenger seat with power driver's seat memory. You also get heated seats, kind of a weird omission on the Civic Si. In addition to the extra features, we also find a longer warranty in the Acura. That's definitely going to be important for some folks. The average Honda has a 3-year 36,000-mile warranty. The average Acura has a 4-year 50,000-mile warranty, so it's definitely longer. You also get 2 years and 24 months of free included maintenance, or I guess just included maintenance since you paid for the vehicle anyway. In the Acura, you don't have that in the Honda. If you're worried about maintenance and breakdowns, things like that, you do get some extra roadside assistance as well. That's linked to the base warranty on both vehicles, so you get 3 years, 36,000 miles of roadside assistance on the Honda, 4 years, 50,000 miles on the Acura. You also get the better Acura dealer experience, and I think the Acura looks a little bit better on the outside. So as far as Civic Si versus Acura Integra, I would say they're both equal value, and it ends up really being a decision based on whether you want those luxury features. Do you want features like the heads-up display? Do you want the power seat, something that I really wish the Civic Si had? It does have the adjustable lumbar support as well, heated seats, all that kind of stuff. You're going to find that on the Integra. You are going to give up a little bit in terms of driving dynamics and acceleration, but the difference is awfully small. And for 2023, you can put summer tires on both of them if you wanted to, but neither one is going to come with them from the factory. Bottom line, the Integra is an excellent, excellent vehicle as long as you look at it through the right lens. It is not quite a competitor to the Audi A3. It's definitely going to be slower, but it's a lot less expensive. It's really not a competitor to the upper end trims of the CLA or the BMW 228i. And that's before we even talk about the next level up in performance, the S3, the BMW 2 Series with the 2-liter turbocharged high-output engine. Of course, the different versions of the CLA, AMG, etc. You can get your AMG CLA well over $70,000 if you try. Clearly, there is no Acura Integra that's going to compete. But again, in that limited window, it makes a lot of sense. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section, and what would you be buying if you were looking to spend about $36,000? Would you rather have the fully loaded and more engaging manual transmission Integra, or would you get an absolutely base Audi A3? Let me know. Find me over at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those other social places, and I'll see all of you next week.